Alright, hello everybody. Sorry about the delay. Was having some lovely issues with YouTube backing up. So it took me a minute to resolve them. Actually, it took me 7 minutes to resolve them, a little bit more than. Just want to welcome everyone into the stream before we get started and just say what we're going to go over. So we're going to do our boundaries like we did in the other series, so that the camera can only... Sorry for the feedback sound, feedback on the sound there. The camera can only operate within certain boundaries, which is a relatively easy thing to do. And because that's going to be relatively short, we'll also do our game time, which will take us into what was section 2 of the original series. So, that said, let's get started. So this series and this YouTube channel have been brought to you by my Patreon sponsors like Nemian Games. And I totally forgot to actually post us going live on my own server. I'm glad I looked over and noticed that. Sorry, I'm just also making sure I have the correct editing file open on the side there. So we have our original code from last time, or all of our code from the last 2 videos, but we're not going to be working on that right away. The first thing we need to do actually is go into our project file. And in our project file, we're going to want to set up our... Hi, Life Lotus. Welcome to the stream, by the way. Sorry, I just noticed that message. We're going to want to set up our profile that we're going to use. So if you remember in the blueprint version of this, we set custom collision profiles in the details panel. We're actually going to make this a lot easier on ourselves and set up a custom profile using the settings in the engine themselves, which will save a crap load of time. It means that we only need to set the boundary box once instead of having to set it for each part of the boundary we set. It will just save time, it's easier, and yeah. Now, there are some rules when you're doing a custom profile like this. The biggest one to be aware of is that, yes, you are limited to a certain number. And I believe it's 36 profiles. I would actually have to double check what the Epic documentation says on this. And as a reminder, you're never expected to memorize this stuff. What you are meant to do is know how to look at this stuff. When I say this stuff, if you don't know what I mean, I'm referring to the Epic documentation. So I'm just going to get the Epic API for blueprints, actually for C++ open right now. So, I say Epic, it's actually the Unreal. Like, I get Epic makes Unreal, but it's this stuff. You're not expected to memorize all of this stuff. So if we go to engine, really, I'm probably gonna want the one like halfway down this page. Let's try that one there. So we go here. You know, once this loads, you'll see how many variables and various subcomponents we have. Like we have AI, we have audio. We can ignore blueprint. But we have all these things. You're not meant to memorize them. You're meant to be able to use the API to find the control that you need. Also, welcome to the stream there, Sarah. 10 out of 10 IGN. Thank you much for that one. Sorry, I am drinking coffee as I do this so I can stay awake. So, again, there will be times where you'll see a tutorial and you'll sit there going, oh, I didn't know I could do it that way. Or, oh, that's a different approach, or I know a better way. That's it to be expected, because there are multiple ways to approach this. And sometimes a way is better, but a lot of the times it's a matter of what is the person trying to achieve. Now, I will say there is an over-reliance on ticks in a lot of tutorials, but there's also a misunderstanding about that it's actually okay to use a tick. It's when you use it. Anyway, before I continue rambling about tutorials, let's go into project settings. So once this pops open, we'll go over to our collision handler under engine. So if we go to engine, collision, you see you have your object channels, your trace channels. Well, down here we have a third one called presets. And we have no collision, block all, overlap, all this stuff. This should all look familiar. If you actually go back here, let's grab this cube. Well, if we scroll down to our collision profile, yes, I've actually heard people think they need to know the API inside and out to be comfortable with this stuff. And that's why I'm stressing that it is utter horse hockey. Yes, I'm trying not to swear. It is utter horse hockey to believe that you need to know the API. So if you're ever talking to someone who's new to this who goes, well, I don't know how to do X, Y, Z, remind them, well, there are actually probably experienced programmers that don't, and what they do is they just refer to the documentation to learn how to do whatever that thing is. Hey there, Vic, how you doing? So, as I was saying, if you look here, let's just change this over to a custom one. Actually, wait, no. We have right here, we have the no collision, block all, overlap, block dynamic, pawn, spectator, UI. These are those profiles right here. So we can create a custom profile, so we don't have to use custom every time we set something up. So the way that's going to work is we're going to create one for the camera pawn itself. We're not going to create one for the blocking volumes, we're going to create one for the camera pawn. So we're going to do new. And we're going to type in camera pawn, and because I'm going to need the exact spelling of this name, case sensitive, I'm going to cheat a bit. It's not really cheating. I'm going to Control-C copy that just so I have it ready. Alright, and now I can set this up. So I am going to do, for no collision, I'm going to change this to query and physics. So we want collision enabled. It is world dynamic is our object type, or I could do it as pawn actually. But I for some reason just like it as world dynamic, and this will be, you can type in a tooltip here. So the camera collision profile for RTS, and we're going to default everything to ignore just for now because it's really relatively simple. And we're going to change our, I skipped a step actually. We're going to hit accept for now. We have one more thing we need to do, and that is actually to set our object channel as well. And we need one object channel. Now, object channels and trace channels, if I remember correctly, well, it says right there actually, you only get 18. That's 18 across both of these. So if you have to use them, make sure you're using them sparingly. All right, so we're going to create another one called map boundaries. We're just going to hit accept. There we go. Let's pop that back open. And you notice we have map boundaries here, and its default is block all. Or its default here is block. And guess what we want it as? We want it as block. And the reason why it defaults to block is, well, if we go to our default responses, we set that to block. Alright. So that's the easy part of what we're doing. We've just set this up. Actually, this is the hardest part of what we have to do, to be fair. For the map boundaries, that is. The next thing we need to do is we need to pop open our C++ code. So I already have my C++ code open from earlier, as I mentioned, all the stuff we had to work on. And we're just going to go over to our camera pawn class file, which is oddly the one I have open. I didn't actually expect that one to be the one I had open. And if you remember from, I think, the first video I wrote, collision profile name used for map boundaries. Well, I'm going to get rid of this, and we're actually going to put the collision profile in. So we have this reference to our collision sphere, which is what we've just spawned in up here as our default sub-object. So remember, the collision sphere, or whatever is doing the colliding, needs to be the default, it needs to be the root object. So this actually is our root object, this collision sphere. So what we're going to do here is we're just going to, call up our collision sphere, and we're going to set its collision profile name. So there are our tooltips. So we have get collision profile, set collision profile. We want set collision profile, and we'll do brackets with quote marks, and then I'm just going to paste in that camera pawn. So that has set our camera pawn. We're pretty much done. Next thing I need to do, and this is going to be something where you will get people saying, "Oh, it's a bad way to do it. You should do the other way." Is I'm just going to. Sorry, I'm just gonna get the thing open up first. I'm just gonna close this, and I'm gonna hit compile here. Now, the other way to do that is actually to close this out and to compile directly from C++ or from Visual Studio. So you have those options. Alright, once it's compiled, I'll be a very happy camper. The other thing I like about recording videos is I can actually delete the moments where we're just sitting waiting things to record. So, also to clear up some confusion, I mentioned, we don't have to set each of the blocking volumes, sorry. Each of the blocking volumes to these custom things. We still do, but we don't have to set the profiles up. So we still have that one step of actually setting what the blocking volume is blocking. But we don't have to actually go through each component of it. So it makes life a tiny, tiny bit easier. So if we go to volumes here, we have our blocking volume. And we're just going to drag that out onto this map as an example. And I am going to cheat a bit, and I'm going to do top perspective. It's not really cheating, I realize. I'm just going to move it there. I'm going to hit spacebar to get it to the sizing I want. And because I know it moves from the center outwards, I'm just going to center it there. Hit spacebar again, and just drag it out. And then I'm going to hold down the... Actually, I'm going to go back to my transform mode. I could hit W, E, or R to move between these. I just like using spacebar. I don't know why. I'm going to hold down my Alt key, and I'm going to drag. You notice it makes a duplicate. I'm just going to put one of them over there. I'm going to hold Shift down and select both of them now. And I'm going to hold Alt again. I'm going to drag out. I'm going to hit spacebar once, and I'm going to rotate these 90 degrees just so we get that nice sort of blocking shape of a box. And there we go. I'm going to select all these blocking volumes. Gonna go down to our collision types here, and within our collision types, all I'm going to do is invisible wall. It's a new preset in this version of the engine. I am going to do custom. I am going to set this to map boundary, so it's blocking all. I could actually just do block all as well, but Alright, now what we should do is we should test this. We hit play. There we go. I can't move past a certain point. And if you watch the mouse, I'm going to move the mouse to the right side of the screen, so we have the edge scroll. And mouse is still there. We're not moving that direction anymore. So we can only get certain movements up to a certain point. So that takes care of our blocking volume. Relatively simple. All right. So that was easy, and that only took, minus the compile time and me rambling, less than 20 minutes. That took about 13 minutes to do. So, and if we weren't rambling so much, that'd have been about 2 minutes, to be fair. So with that said, what we're going to do now is we're going to move on to our game time. And this is going to be a bit more complex. And with regards to our game time, we're going to set up a game state. We're going to do calculations for our game time. We're going to set a date time structure. So there's a bit of math involved in this. And the math can be a bit confusing at first, but it isn't that hard, to be fair. It's relatively simple math. And you're not actually doing the math, you're just making the formula. And the thing you need to remember is how many seconds go into an hour. It's 3,600, or 36,000. It's the only thing you need to remember, really. So if we go into our folder, into our core, we have this player. We're not going to be in player anymore. We're going to create a new folder. And I'm going to call that folder our settings folder, which we'll do by creating the class, though. So this will be our primary game state. Yeah, it's game state, sorry. I just had to think about that for a second. We go next. And under core here, we're just going to do a slash. We'll do settings. So I'll create a new folder. And I'm just going to name this my primary game state RTS, just to have the RTS in there still, and so I know what the heck I'm looking for in a moment when I actually say we're going to use this game state. And I hope I don't do what I did in the blueprint version of this tutorial and actually forget to set the game state to being the game state to set the engine to use this game state. So we're going to create that class. As you see, it's now compiling that class out for us. In a moment, we should get a little pop-up with the stuff for that. It's going to take a second. Again, another reason why I like doing the recordings. I can edit this stuff out. But the other reason I hate doing recordings is I have to edit stuff. All right, there we go. We have our game state, and we are going to ignore that error message. We're going to pop over here, and, well, I'll decide if I want to close this stuff out in a minute, you know. I'm not going to be using any of it, but meh. So, in our header file for our game state, we have our core minimal, we have our game state base, and our generated header. We have this nice little comment thing we're just going to get rid of. And I am just trying to decide if we need to have the class file in this one or not. I will decide that in a little bit. If I need to come back and put the class file in, we can. When I say the class file is, we're going to do a reference. We're going to do an interface, actually, and a reference to our game player controller. Sorry, I was going to say our game state. We're in our game state. We'll take care of that later. The first thing we want to do is actually set up everything we might need. So we want to set up our constructor, because, yes, we are going to need our constructor. We're going to want to set up our begin play, and we're going to want to set up our tick. And then we'll do our normal attributes and functions. So first thing we're going to do is our constructor, which is going to be a public. And so a constructor to set default values. And our constructor is always, always, always the name of the class file that we're working in with no arguments passed in. And then we're going to do our protected. And this will be our begin play, and we'll do a virtual void as common with begin play. And because begin play is a default function in our parent class, we will use the override, which again comes from, it is an optional thing from Epic. And then finally we'll do our another public. Now you don't need to have these separated in, you know, separated as two different publics. I just do that because it just makes it easier for me, and I like it visually. But I could do everything I'm about to do here. So everything I'm about to do here in this public up here. And this is, sorry, I meant to make a comment there. This is going to be our tick. So virtual void, and then void, not voice. And it'll be tick, and our argument is float delta time. And it has to be float delta time. That is the expected argument to be passed in. It has to be a float at least. And then we have our override. So you notice we have these error messages. It's just because we haven't defined them in the class file yet. I am going to close these other ones out. I don't need them. If I change my mind later on, we will come back and actually use them. All right. Now, we'll define them in a moment. There are some other things I want to do first. I want to define some of the attributes we'll be using. And then we can worry about our methods in a moment. So, I am going to, as I mentioned, we're going to do our attributes. So remember, these are our variables, and they'll be protected. And the first one we'll actually do later on, which will be our controller ref do later. But after that, we'll have our first part of our calendar, which will be our years. And it's going to be uProperty. Just so we have that information, uProperty. We want to be able to edit this anywhere, which is a bit interestingly protected. Blueprint, read, write. And we're going to give this a category. And the category we're going to give it is calendar. And the type will be int, and now it should be int32 to be fair. Unreal will auto-convert this, but if you want to be proper, int32, years. The extra space that's added in by Visual Studio is not that important. You can ignore it. Yes, it is garish to look at sometimes, but meh. So we're just going to create a whole bunch of variables for this calendar. And if you haven't worked out what it is going to be, it's going to be months, days, day of week. And day of week is optional, actually. So we have years, months, days. And we're going to have day of week. And what day of week is it's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Days would be the 1st, the 2nd, the 3rd, or like today, the 26th? 25th. Today is the 25th. So days would be 25 if we're thinking about today. Day of week would be Saturday. And then we're going to have one more, and if you follow the blueprint version of this, this is just to check, do we need to increment what day we're on? And that is our day counter. And this is an int that fluctuates between 0 and 1. That's all it's doing. Is it's going, is it a new day? No, then my value is 0. Hey, it's now hour 24. My value is 1. Add a day to days. And then everything else will increment. All right. Next, we're going to need stuff for the clock. So our clock's going to have hours, minutes, seconds. Technically, you could have milliseconds and smaller values as well, but we aren't going to be using those values. In fact, actually, for the DateTime structure, you only need up into, I think you only need up until days. I don't even think you need minutes and hours. I'd actually have to double check that, but I am fairly certain you can get away with using very, very little there. And we can check the actual node in a moment when we pop open the blueprint version of this to test it. But before we do that, we're going to just take one of these properties real quick. We're going to copy it. We're going to change this over to clock. And in here, again, we're going to use int, so we want hours. All right, so now that we have hours, we're just going to copy this again. We'll have minutes, seconds. So let's change this to minutes. And this to seconds. So we are now just declaring all these variables still. And we just have a couple more we need to do. We need to do a float for game speed. And we don't, unlike the earlier blueprint version of this, need a default game speed. We can use one if we want, but yeah, we actually don't need it at all. So yeah. And this is the reason why we don't need it is we're using the constructor. We're going to use this constructor to make or to set our variables. So we don't have it to set it on begin play like we do in the blueprint version. All right. All of that said, let's actually do that. So let's take this. We're just going to copy the property one again. This will be our game speed settings, and it's going to be a float, and this float will be game speed. We will just set this once. We won't have two where it's the default again. So we won't have to have two variables for that. We will have other variables in our game speed settings though, or in the category, and one will be game time. So this will be a float that stores our seconds, minutes, and hours as a variable. So that's why we have to worry about that 36,000 that was somewhat earlier. If you're not sure what I mean yet, don't worry about it. I will explain that in just a second. Just know we need a float that stores our hours, minutes, and seconds together, which means it's storing them as seconds. All right, the next thing we need is we need to have our date time structure. And to do that, we have to go back to the top first real quick. So under game state base here, I'm going to do a hashtag or # include misc date time, and then it autofills with that .h. Now, oh, sorry, I was going to say I'm going to include another header, but that's actually for something I was doing unrelated to the setup. The next thing we're going to do here is we're going to actually create a variable that uses the DateTime structure. So I'm just going to clean up the spacing here a bit. It's driving me crazy. I'm going to paste in our header there, and we're going to delete this bit here. And I'm going to do f DateTime. So that's the DateTime structure. That's why we just included that header up here. So we can have this structure. And this is going to be DateTime struct is the name. All right, so let's look at that tooltip. This implements a date and time. Values of the type are represented by times between midnight 000, January 1st, year 001, and midnight, which is 23:59:59.999, December 31st, 9,999. So, and this is using the Gregorian calendar. The other things we need to think about, I'm just trying to find the part I'm looking for on what it uses. Well, I mean, you can read through this if you want. What I was looking for was the number of arguments that is required for their constructors. This is an overloaded, it has an overloaded constructor, which means you can pass in different sorts of arguments, but it does have a certain minimum expected. All right, so now that we've done all of this, now that we've declared all our variables, one thing I really, really want to do before going any farther forward is actually declare the variable. Sorry, not declare it, is actually initialize the variables. And unfortunately, with constructors, you have to use the sort of less pretty way of initializing variables. So let's just go into here for a minute. So we're in the primary class file. You see we have our primary game state RTS header up there. Yay, right? Well, actually, I'm going to cheat and go back here for a second. I'm going to steal this. I'm just going to copy that. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create our constructor. Or we're going to define our constructor. We've already declared that we have a constructor. Now we need to define what this constructor is doing. And all it's doing is initializing our variable. So we have all of that set up. Really? You're going to give me that error message? Come on. All right. Give me a second. Well, that is problematic. It's solvable, but problematic and annoying. All right, so it's the header and the class file for some reason got split. I don't believe it gives me that issue anywhere else. That's the header. Camera upon RTS. Yeah, it's not giving me that error here. So I'm not sure why that's happened, but okay. You know what we're gonna do real quick? We're gonna very quickly declare these things and see if we're gonna try to compile it and see if the error goes away. So for the couple of questions that came in earlier, this is the C++ version of the RTS series. So the RTS series on my channel is mostly Blueprint. Actually, it's only Blueprint. And I said I would do a C++ version of it. So I started doing the C++ version as these live streams just because, yeah, I thought it would be easier. And we're currently doing what would be the first video of Section 2 from that Blueprint version. But no, this is not a new project. This is the third video in that series. or in this series. Just so you're aware. And welcome to the stream. So we just want to initialize our variables. So we're gonna start with our calendar, and I'm gonna cheat a bit. I'm gonna use today's date, just like I did in the RTS series, except for it's not February. I think I did on Valentine's Day actually. So it's years, and it's currently 2020. God, you all, yeah, you all can probably hear my thoughts on that. What the heck? Did I name you years? I did. Again, I'll worry about why we're having this issue in a moment. But yeah, that shouldn't be happening. Then it's months. It's the 7th month. It's days next, and it's the 25th today. Day of week is, this is Saturday, so... Oh, I can't remember if they start on Sunday or not, or on Monday. So we're going to put 6 down and not 7 and to see what happens. Oh, this is Saturday. At this point, I could actually check the API to see what the enum actually has it set to, but meh. I mean, that's it's something I'm going to do on live stream right now. I might in a minute. And our day counter, we're just going to default to 0. Again, these are declared in the header, but it's one of those weird errors you get sometimes. So we have hours next, and I'm just going to do 13, and then we're going to do minutes. I'm going to do 30, and seconds, just so we have, I don't know why I keep putting a semicolon in there. We're just going to do it that way. All right, so now we've done our clock and our calendar. We've declared the variables, we've initialized them. Now we have our game settings, or game speed settings. Sorry about that. Game speed settings, and I'm just going to make some notes here. So, no, I want that, thank you. Real time, game speed, time and game. So, if we want 1 second real time, so 1 second in our real time to be 1 hour in the game, then we're gonna set our game speed to 1. This is 1 hour. 1 hour is a game hour, so every second would be an hour. In real life, every second that passes, if we use 60 as our game speed, it would make 1 second equal to 1 minute in the game. If we use, again, using 1 second as our base, we use 3600, I keep saying 36,000 earlier, 3600 as our game speed. This will make 1 second in real life equal to 1 second in the game. In other words, real time. All right, next we're gonna move from seconds. We want 1 minute in our real life to represent 1 day in the game. Then we use a value of 2.5. Now, you might be wondering how I know all of these values. Trial and error and some basic math. Yeah, it's trial and error and then basic math. You can actually do it without any of the trial and error if you just want to do the basic math, but I got stupid and did the trial and error approach first. And finally, let's say we want 1 hour in real life to represent 1 day in the game. We would use a value of 150. All right, so that's just various settings. Sorry for my cheeky, squeaky chair. I need to get a new one. We are going to set our game speed to 60. And again, unlike the Blueprint version, we don't have that default game speed because we're using a constructor. We don't need to worry about crap. And then we have our game time. And our game time is a float. But this one is where that math that I was talking about is going to come in. Remember, game time is our clock stored together. So we have to convert everything down to our seconds. I'm actually just making sure that's right what I just said out loud. I know the math I'm about to do is correct, but I'm looking at the math going, are we actually storing that as hours or as seconds or as hours? No, we're storing it. We're storing it as seconds. Okay, it looks just weird in my head. So the first thing we're gonna do is we're actually gonna pass in our hours, and we're gonna add that to our minutes divided by a float, and it's gonna be divided by 60.6. I'm just gonna put the F in so I make sure it's a float. And then we're going to add in, again using brackets there, our seconds. And we're going to divide this by a float. And this float will be 3,600. So why do I keep using 3,600? Well, let's just pop open a calculator and take a look at why I'm using 3,600. 3,600 divided by 60 is 60. It's a number of seconds in an hour. All right, there we go. So we have all of that set up to get our game time. This is our default game time. This will be updating every tick in a moment. The next thing we need to do is we need to set our date time structure. So remember, the date time structure is a more efficient way to do what I have done in the blueprint. So if you want to switch over on the blueprint and change this to a date time structure, go and do that. We're going to pass in our years. We're going to pass in our months. And the order on this is important. It starts with years and goes all the way down to milliseconds. So years, months, days, hours, minutes, seconds, you have to pass it through in that order. I cannot stress that enough. And again, this is an overloaded constructor. I believe you only need to pass in years, months, and days, but I will double check that at some point during the stream. Anything past that is optional, but just like every constructor, order matters. The order in which you're passing through this argument matters. All right, days, hours, minutes, seconds. Make sure I get my capitalization correct there. So we're passing through all this information. And the final thing I want to do is I want to guarantee that this actor that we're currently working in, this class file, can tick. So primary actor tick. B for Boolean can ever tick is true. And then we're going to do primary actor again, tick. And then we're going to do another, call the other Boolean up, start with tick enabled equals true. And I showed this in the last stream, but I'm going to show it again. I'm not going to go through what the primary actor tick is like I did in the last stream, but I am going to show you what I showed in the last video, or the last live stream. Is we go in here, and do I have a debugging one? Yes, I do. Pop open this debugging one. We're just going to open this in full editor for a second. Go to our class defaults. There we are. Start with tick enabled. Allow tick before begin play. It's actually just that top one we were able to see. That's that second Boolean we messed with. B ever can tick is... Actually, there is a way to change that in the blueprints. I just can't remember how off the top of my head. It's probably really, really obvious, and I'm just blanking. All right, because before we go forward, and actually just to save myself a little bit of a headache, I'm going to comment these out just for a moment. I want to make sure this actually compiles. Hello, my desktop. Sorry about that. You're just getting me clicking and everything as I try to get this back up to the right window. No idea what was on my desktop at that point. So, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to hit compile real quick. I really am just hoping that's some random error that goes away and is not something I'm going to have. Oh, no, we had that error message. All right, let's see what we're having. I spelled that wrong. Lovely. I did it over and over again too because I copied and pasted. Anywhere. You know what? That is just that's just something I would do. Okay. Well, sorry about watching me just go through here and fix a typo. Let's try that again. If there's another typo, I'm just going to start laughing some more at myself. There we go. All right, it compiled. That means that error, which is that random sort of annoying IntelliSense thing. Yes, I know there are better choices in IntelliSense, but I'm going to assume many people watching my series are not shelling out money for better... I'm now actually blanking on the term for what IntelliSense is. Better spell check for code. I'm so sorry. Every programmer just heard me say that and started spinning in their chairs with anger and frustration at me calling it spell check. Oh, sorry about that. All right. So now that I've made a complete fool of myself, what we're gonna do is we're gonna do our begin play. And remember, that's a void And again, I'm going to just cheat, and I'm going to copy this. Well, clearly you work. Begin play. All right. And we're going to do super. Again, I'm not going to go over why we're using super. Again, that's my last video. Begin play. And that's actually all we're going to do for this one right now. We will have things we'll put in here later on, but that will be for later videos in this series. Hey, that's really simple, right? So now what we need to do is we need to do our tick. And again, that's void. We'll just paste that in. It's tick float delta time. And let's put our curly boys in. Sorry, if you're on my server for Discord, I'm making a joke about making a reference to a joke I just posted. And it's super tick. Still passing in delta time. All right. We only want this to go off if our game time is not equal to 0. So if the game is not paused. Funny part is, in the blueprint version, you don't need this if, but yeah, we're going to use this if here. And the reason why we're doing this is, again, because we're using a tick here because this is something that should be going off every tick. We want this to go off on every tick. Therefore, we use tick. The one time that it really isn't is when the game's paused, which, you know what, fair enough. There are other ways we could do this, but it is just easier to use. It is just more efficient at the end of the day to use tick. Instead of creating a custom tick that we pause and unpause. And this is the only thing we're going to run on this tick, in fact. So it is just as efficient as creating a custom timer. And that is just, again, because we are using this tick as it's meant to be used, as a tick. Not as, oh, we're going to use this whenever the player is running, or we're going to use this whenever the player is hungry, or, oh, we're going to use this just in specific conditions. No, we're using this all the time. We want this to go off on every frame. Because we want this to go off on every frame, we are using tick. And I know I'll put an if statement in. Again, technically the if statement isn't needed. I'm just using it as sort of a backup method in case we have issues when we pause. We can come back and remove this if later on, but for now, I am going to leave it in. All right. Now, what do we want to do here? Well, we're going to run a whole bunch of functions. And the functions we're going to run will be our calculate game time, our set clock calendar, and then we'll actually pass some information over in the next videos for our UIs to work. Actually, we'll probably be doing that separately from the tick. I have to decide on that one. Actually, no, we probably will be doing it on the tick, so we want to pass over the information using the interface over tick. That's why we're using interface. But we're going to need a bunch of functions. So let's make those functions. Let's go back here for a moment. All right, so, well, we need, as I mentioned, some functions. So these are our attributes. Or sorry, not our attributes, our methods. All right, so we're going to have a U function. And this will be blueprint callable so we can test things out. Print callable. I don't want the CPF version. No. Blueprint callable. And we're going to get this a category of game time. All right. So this one's going to have a few arguments we want to pass in. And this is the moment where I'm going to spend a lot of time just explaining some stuff. Now, before we get into this explanation, if you are not familiar with what pass by value versus pass by reference is, this is going to make no sense. So that is a basic C++ concept. If you're not familiar with that yet, we need to go over that first. But before we do so, I'm going to pause and I'm going to find a good example. Give me one second. I'm going to pause the microphone for a moment. Sorry, so I was going to find a good example. I needed to sneeze and cough for a moment. So the example that I am going to use to actually get it up on screen, pass by ref, GIF. I'm just going to get this nice little GIF up, open in new window. Hey, it's a Java thing, but you know what? It works for what I want. All right. So on our right, we have pass by value, which is our default when we're working in C++, is pass by value. And on the left, we have pass by reference. Now, and also in Unreal, by the way, the default also is pass by reference. As you see, we have a cup, and the cup is empty, right? So we make a function called fill cup. And in pass by value by default, we fill the cup. But if we look at our original cup, what happens here is it doesn't fill. Only the one in the function fills. So what it's doing is it's taking the value of cup, which is empty, and it's changing it from empty to fill. But the original value of cup remains empty. If we go to pass by reference, and pass by reference, we create a reference to this variable. Instead of copying the value, we're making a reference to the variable, which is actually passing the address of the variable through. Oh yeah, pass by reference will always be superior. That's, yeah. And when we fill the cup here, in this version of the function, it fills it in the original as well. So why is this important? Well, a couple of reasons. And the one that we need to talk about today, and I'm just trying to think about how I want to broach this topic, is related to, well, functions. You're probably sitting there, if you know any coding, going, what the hell? Yeah, of course, what? So if you've done Blueprint, if you've only done Blueprint and you haven't been really exposed to C++, you will notice that in in Blueprints, we can do something that's really weird. We can get multiple return values. Now you're probably going, well, why is this weird? Well, it's technically not. Well, that's a more in-depth conversation. But because of pass by reference, we're able to return multiple values or multiple things, multiple types in Unreal. Again, if you're not familiar with coding, you're probably sitting there going, well, why is that weird? Well, whenever we declare a function, which we're about to declare one here, we declare in its declaration handle what we expect it to return. So, in this first case, which will be our calculate time, we are expecting it to return nothing. This isn't true, by the way. But we are expecting it to return nothing. So we do virtual void. That's the return. Nothing. Void. It has no value. We give it a name, which is calculate time. But because of pass by reference and because of pass by value, Unreal allows us to actually return multiple things. And you will see in a moment that the way in which you make a pass by reference in Unreal is different than the way you'd make a pass by reference in typical C++. If you do the typical C++ approach, what you are doing is you are telling Unreal, I want this to be a return value, which is actually what we're about to do in a moment. So if you're familiar with C++ but not familiar with Unreal, these are two distinctions you need to be aware of. One, passing a reference is done in a particular way, and I'll show you that in a couple of functions. Two, if you want to have multiple return values, you use the default pass by reference syntax. So let's start with our arguments here. We're going to do a float delta time, so we want to actually pass in delta time. We're going to pass in our current game speed, and we're going to want to pass in our game time in. we are going to want to return two values. One's a float and one is an integer. So we're going to do float ampersand as if we were doing a pass by reference, game time out, and an int ampersand as if we were doing a pass by reference, and yes, that should be lowercase I. And this will be day counter out. Now, it doesn't matter if the ampersand is on the variable type or the variable name, up to you. I believe when I hit compile, it will actually move it automatically over to the variable type. Now, there is a very, very logical reason that pass by reference works as passing out things that, if you're familiar with C++, should be very glaringly obvious if you think about it for a moment. When you do a pass by reference, let's just pop this back open for a second. Let me find that GIF. The value here is always the same as the value there. They are the same thing. We are changing one. So, sorry, I didn't get to the mute button in time for that one. Sorry about that. So what we're saying here is, well, if we're changing this here, what we expect to come out is to be the thing we've changed. It makes sense. It's kind of confusing the first time, but it makes sense. So this is going to pass out our game time and our day counter. And I put the outs in here because as a C++ programmer, seeing that ampersand, I am always going to think it's passed by reference. Okay. All right. We have a couple more functions we need to declare. Yes, I know I haven't done anything for it. I'm just going to copy our ufunction bit, and we're going to do another virtual void. This will be set clock calendar. Actually, it should be calendar clock, but whatever, because the calendar comes first. All right. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to have one more of these, and this is the one where I'm going to show you how you do a pass by reference in Unreal. And this will be another virtual void. This is going to be set date time. So if you want to pass by reference, you do uparam, so uparameter ref int, or whatever your variable type is, and you still use the ampersand. There we go. So we're going to pass in our year. So all this is doing is this is going to be updating this particular function. Wow, I'm pointing at the screen like you can see what I'm doing. So, sorry about that. This particular function is going to pass in our values into our date time structure. Where is that? That's right there. So this calculates what our day is and everything like that. Update stuff. We'll have some functions that we need to take care of in a moment. But this is what's going to update our calendar. And I'm going to cheat. And this is going to be all ints. Again, technically it's int32s, and I should be using int32s, but the engine will auto-convert for me because I'm lazy. Month. And notice I'm not using months or years. I'm just saying year, month, day. And I'm just doing that so I don't get myself confused later on. We have hour. That actually should have a space. Sorry about that. And yes, I'm going over the recommended maximum, which is 5. I'm going to be putting 6 in here. So after hour, we have minute. That's number 5, by the way. And finally, we have second. Sorry, I'm just making sure I put that ampersand, the semicolon in. All right. There we go. So we're going to call these functions in our class file here. I was blanking on that word for a minute. We might have one more function we need to declare. I haven't decided that's going to be in this video or another video, how I want to tackle that. I will decide that in half a second probably. All right, so, well, we don't have them declared yet, but we're still going to call them. So we will do calculate time. I did call it calculate time, right? I'm going to just cheat and copy that. There we go. And we're going to pass in delta time. Because this, remember, if we go back here, That's our float. Then we need current game speed, game time in, and we're going to worry about the other stuff in a moment. So, we had game speed. Well, our game speed is game speed. That's pretty simple. Our game time is game time. Our game time out is also game time. It's the same thing. It's that and that. There we go. Game time in, game time out. It's the same thing. And then it's day counter. That's all. All right. Then we have our set. I forgot like semicolon. Set clock calendar. And we don't do anything for that one. What was the other one we created? Set date time. Sorry, I'm just trying to remember how I want to tackle this. You know what? We'll take this one step at a time. We'll do our calculate time first, and we'll do our set clock calendar bit. Yeah, just because otherwise my brain's gonna crack trying to work out how to explain stuff. So we're calculating our time. What we're gonna do is we're just gonna cheat a bit. We're gonna copy all of that, and we're gonna copy the calculate time. And we have our float, delta time, our float, current game speed, our float, game time in, our float, ampersand, game time out, and our float, our int, ampersand, day counter. Day count out. I'm not sure I said day counter. It's day counter there, that's why. And then we're gonna just double check that I have that right. Day counter. You know what? See, it did move it like I said it would. I'm gonna be lazy. Just because I'm paranoid I have a typo now, I'm just gonna paste that in. Hey look, there's a typo there. Alright, so the way this function is going to work is we are going to set daytime. So our game time, not daytime. So game time is going to be calculated by taking the modular of our delta time by our current game speed and adding our game time in, dividing that by 24. So let me try that sentence again. We're going to divide our delta time and our current game speed and our game time in by 24 and take the remainder of that. And the remainder is going to be our game time. Because that is going to be, our game time is just a calculation of seconds. If our value becomes greater than 1, in other words, so game time is going to be equal to a whole bunch of numbers, and these numbers are going to go from 0 through 24. At 0, 0, 0, 50. I think it's 0, 0, 0. I think this is the right set of numbers. I might be off by a few zeros. That is equal to it's equal to midnight. 30 seconds. That's equal to 30 seconds past midnight. If we change this to 1, now it's 1 minute past 1 minute 30 seconds past midnight. The reason why the last number 50 is that way is 50 is half of a minute, or it's half of 50 is half of the whole next number, which is 1 here. These represent seconds. So instead of having 0 to 60, it's 0 to 100. 30 seconds is half a minute. 50 is half of 100. Think of it that way. So the second that this equals this, by the way, this number will never equal what I'm about to type onto the screen. It will never equal that. It will automatically set this back to 0 at some point. But once it gets to something like this, because it's a float, it actually could get here for a tick. It will reset it to 0, but it will update the day counter. So that everything in game time is always the remainder of whatever this number is divided by 24. So we use the f mod, which is the float modular operator, We're going to have 3 brackets. Sorry about that. We're going to take our delta time, so our tick, and we are going to divide that by our current game speed. We're going to step outside that first bracket there, and we are going to add our game time in, so that we take whatever our current game time is and we update it, which that's that game time out right there, technically. All right. And then we are going to divide that by 24. And the remainder of whatever that is... Why are you giving me... Oh, do I need to actually add a header in for... I do, I think. Does fmod require a header? No, I don't think it does. We'll find out if it can't compile. You're not undefined. Pretty sure you're not undefined. I'm pretty sure I don't need a special header for you. Famous last words. Sorry, I just kicked the cord holding the microphone. So, all this does is it gets us our game time. So we're calculating our time here. We also need to calculate our day counter. And again, we're going to have 3 brackets. We're going to take everything in here, actually. Actually, you know what? We're going to delete these 3 brackets. We're going to take everything but the fmod there. We're going to paste that in, and we're going to just do this divided by 24. And remember, our day counter is an int. If I can find it in here, I'd be happy. There we go. So if this value is less than 1, it's going to remain 0. When it's 1, yay, it's going to update, and we'll set it back to 0. All right, and now for testing purposes, because I need this for testing purposes, we're going to do game time out, and this is going to be equal to game time. And this is for BP use only. We're going to do day counter out. And this is day counter, again, for BP use only. All right, so we have now done that function there. So now we've calculated our time. Because we've calculated our time, well, we now need to set our calendar. And this is where the math becomes a bit intensive. So, sorry, I'm just making sure I missed no questions. Doesn't look like I have. Okay, so the way we're going to do this is we're going to have a whole bunch of calculations, a whole bunch of if statements. Actually, I think it's just 2 long if statements. Actually, no, they're 2 short if statements in this version. I've toned it down from the BP version. The BP version's massive. And remember, in the BP version, it took me an hour alone to do this part. It probably will take me as long here because I'm explaining everything. This is the bread and butter of this video. So we're going to do void. And again, I'm just going to cheat. We can ignore the fact that we're getting the weird sort of error message. We know it's compiling. And it is set our clock calendar. I am really paranoid. I've somehow got a typo there. Clock calendar. Funny part is we know where it's going to compile because that error message is gone here. Second, I put in the brackets here. Let's just save this, and I'm going to show you something. So you see that error message here? Notice that the fact that it's saying it's undefined is no longer true here. So we know this is going to compile. It's just IntelliSense being weird. Again, I realize there are better choices than IntelliSense. So we're going to calculate at the start of this our seconds, our minutes, and then our hours. So that's in the order in which we're going to calculate these. So we need to do an initial conversion. So we need to take our float, and this is going to be a local value, initial conversion, and this is local only to this function. So I'm just going to name this. I'm actually not going to put the local in. This isn't like I'm doing a blueprint. It's local only to this. I don't use this anywhere else. I'm not going to be calling this up anywhere else. I'm not worried I'm going to accidentally call a variable that I don't use somewhere else. And this is going to be equal to our game time. Well, I said it's a conversion. We need to convert this to something. We need to convert this back to just pure seconds. And the way we do that is we multiply it by 3,600. I'm adding the F in to make sure it's a float. Sorry, you might be hearing some weirdness out from my microphone. That's just, I'm not sure what that is. It's coming from outside, and I can't see what's going on there. So we're going to then set our seconds. So we have our seconds declared up here to start at 15. Well, we're going to update this. We're going to do seconds, and we are going to take the floor. So we're taking the... If you don't know what a floor versus ceiling is, it's the limit of the real number. So we're taking the lower limit of the real number. So I'm just trying to think of a good way to explain floor versus ceiling. So let's just say we have the number 5. When does 5 become 5? Well, 5 becomes 5 when when we hit 4.5. 5 becomes 6 when we get to 5.5. So the ceiling of 5 is 5.4. That's the upper limit. And the floor of it is, well, technically 4.5. Now, that's not how this really works in C++. Those are actual mathematical limits. In C++, what floor does is it rounds down. So if we have 4.4, then it's going to go 4. If we have 4.5, then it's going to go 5. So actually, no, sorry, 4.5 would still go 4. If we have 4.6, then it would go 5. So it's going to round down, returning to the largest value that is not greater than whatever we're currently looking at. I hope my rough explanation of rounding and floors and ceilings and real limits of numbers actually makes sense, but if it doesn't, just think about it, it's rounding down. That's the easiest way to think about it. It's rounding down. It's a little bit more complicated than that, but we'll just leave it to it's rounding down. We're going to take the floor of an fmod, and we're going to take the initial conversion and divide the initial conversion by 60. And this will range between 0 to 59. Let's think about this for a second. Just going to pop open a calculator here. 360 divided by 60. It's 60, right? So, let's say our initial conversion is 1. 1 times, actually, sorry, no, it's just going to make this a little bit more confusing. Let's use a different number than 1. That was a bad choice. So let's say we have 2 times 3600, so that's our initial conversion. We're going to divide this by 60. That's 120, and we're going to divide... I've picked a bad example for a number. I'm trying to think of a good example to explain how that math is actually working. I know what it is. 0.2. There's a good number. Times 360. Divided by 60. That's 12. There we go. That's actually a good number to use. So... oh, it's actually not a good number to use. Why is it not? Because I'm not using an fmod. That's why. I'm just trying to think of a way to demonstrate how this is working. And I am blanking. We're taking a value of hours, seconds, and minutes. We are converting them purely to seconds. We are removing anything from that isn't under 60. That would be the hours and minutes that are left over. So the remainder, the modular, are the seconds. That's what's going on there. Also, I forgot my semicolon. We have to do the same for minutes. So if we take the math we've done before, which is the floor and the fmod, and then we do our int sorry, hang on. Let's just think about this for a moment before I go any further. We're going to basically repeat this math, but we're going to repeat it for the minutes now. And the way we have to repeat it is, well, we need to take our initial conversion, and again, we're going to do our thing with 60 there, but the next thing we need to do is we don't want the seconds anymore. Here, we're just getting the seconds because we've only looked at, well, everything that's going in, which is hours, minutes, and seconds. We're removing, by using this modular, everything that isn't seconds. We don't want to do the same thing here, so what we're going to do here is we're going to remove, prior to the modular, everything that's less than 60 already. So we're going to remove the seconds. So the way we do that is we do divided by 60 first. And we want to convert this value to an int, by the way, for that to work. So we're going to take our initial conversion. We're going to remove everything that is less than 60. We only are taking an integer of it, so everything greater than 60, which will be our hours and our minutes. And then we're getting the modular of that, which will remove the hours. So this returns just the minutes. Again, 0 to 59. Now comes the tricky part. We're going to do hours. And again, we want the floor, and we want the fmod, and we are going to remove the seconds like we did before. So we're going to do int initial conversion, and we're going to divide that by 60. Once we've divided that by 60, well, we're left with the hours and the minutes. We want to get rid of the minutes now. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to divide again by 60. So we're removing the minutes. And then we want to know, is there a remainder or not? That's what the fmod is. But instead of fmod 60, is now, we don't have to worry about 60 seconds. So 60 seconds being a minute. We don't worry about 60 minutes being an hour. We have to worry about 24 hours being a day. If the remainder here, when we divide by 24, is greater than 1, we're in the next day. So we're doing 24. This will return a value 0 to 23. If 23 is greater than, if we hit 24, then we are in the next day. So this is calculating our actual seconds, minutes, and hours. If our hours go there than 24, then we're calculating our day. So the way we work with this is we set our calendar next. We do day of week, and we do plus equal day counter, and we do a check here. If day of week is greater than 7, then we set day of week to 1. This just makes sure that we don't somehow end up with a smarch on the 13th day of the 13th month. The next thing we do is we then go on and we set our days as plus equal to our day counter. Remember, our day counter is 0 and 1. It will fluctuate between the two. It only turns into 1 when our value is greater than 24 on this counter. Otherwise, it's 0. So, if days are greater than 30... Oh, no. Sorry. Give me a second. That's wrong. I need to actually... So I mentioned earlier looking up things in the API. I'm going to look something up in the API because I forgot the name of the thing I want. So I'm just going to quickly search in Google and I'll show you what I'm doing in a moment. Unreal API DateTime I'm just going to do DateTime. I know I'll find it pretty quickly in here because I know I've looked at it before. So this is what I'm using. I'm going to include the header, aren't I? Yes, I am. So I'm going to very quickly add the header in before I forget. Boom, just toss that into there. I want... It's kind of weird it's not loading properly. Let's just reload this page real quick. I want the... Not get day of week, not get day of year. I want get days and month. There we go. So this is the function I want to use. Days and month. All right. So let's hope to God I actually use this correctly, because I'm probably gonna typo something here and mess it up. Because my prep file, I've done a default 30 days instead of using the yeah. So if days are greater than days in month, years, comma, months. That actually is not right. I know that isn't right. I will fix that mistake in a moment, because yeah, I totally skipped a step on what I was going to do. We'll come back to that and fix that in just a moment. Yes, I know it's wrong. We're going to, if our days are greater than the days in the month for what we're looking at. So in other words, if it's July and we have 31 days, if days is now 32, we are going to set days back to 1. We are going to increment months. So we go from the 7th month to the 8th month. That's actually months. It is months, right? It is plural. I'm not going crazy. Yeah, it is months. And yeah, that's all we're going to do there. We're going to do one more check, and that is if months is greater than 12. So if we have the 13th month, Smarch, sorry for the Simpsons references, then we're actually going to set this back to the first month, and we're going to increment years. So that's all we're doing here. We'll go through this is we are setting our time. If our time is greater than 24, we're incrementing our day counter. If it isn't, it's saying it's 0. We are then calculating our seconds, our minutes, and our hours. If our day of the week is, say, 6, I think that's what our default right now is. It is 6, and our day counter is still 0, then that stays as 6. Once this hits 24 hours, this will become 7. Again, once it hits 24 hours, it'll go to 8. If 8 is greater than 7, it will change it back to 1. Anyway, it will continue past 0 every single time. We go to days. If day counter is 0, then it doesn't increment days. But when it does increment days, it checks, is days greater than the number of days we have in the month, or in this month, which we pass in our year and our month to check for leap years, by the way. And if it is, then we increment our months. So we go from, say, July to August, and we set our day back to 1. If we're in December and we've incremented our months, well, then we're going to set our month back to 1, so it's January, and increment our year instead. So the next thing we need to do is actually pass this information into somewhere. We need to set our structure that we've created. So what we're going to do is we're going to take that last function we made, this one right here, and we're going to set our date time. So we're just going to call set date time. We're going to pass in years, months, days, hours, minutes, seconds. And again, the order on that matters. It has to be in that order. All right. Well, it won't work because we actually haven't declared this variable yet, and because I haven't fixed that error. But we'll go back to that in a minute. So we'll do void. Just to double check that it is void. Yeah, it is. Right. We're going to cheat a bit and copy that. I missed the A. Paste that in, and it's going to be our set date time. And again, I'm going to cheat. I should have just copied it from this one. I don't want to type the U param in every time. All right, we're gonna copy this, paste that into there. All right. Why am I getting that error? All right, I'll worry about that error in a second. This isn't actually a really, really easy function to do anyway. All we're gonna do is we're gonna take this right here. We're gonna copy this entire thing. We're gonna come down here. We're gonna paste it in, and we're gonna delete the S's off everything. Why are we deleting the S's, you're asking? Well, year, this is years. Month, this was months. Day, well, this was days. Now they're all saying the same thing. So these are the variables we're passing in. The S's are here because we're actually using seconds, minutes, hours. In here, all we're doing is looking at the values or the names we're giving these things. Why are you giving me error? I'm going to compile real quick. I know I'm going to get an error. I want to see what the error is because I'm blind. Yeah, I know. All right, so delta time undeclared identifier. Oh, that's a typo. Whoops. Fmod takes one argument. No, which one is this one? This is line 72. Floor bracket Fmod bracket. Oh, whoops. That should be one more bracket there. And we're gonna need one more bracket here now. All right. So outer bracket, we have one for the Fmod up to that 60 there. So that this is what's being divided by 24. And then we have everything that's in here. And everything that's in there. All right, so that's those two typos or missing things. So if I'm looking at the errors, that was the delta time was spelled wrong. I accidentally didn't put enough brackets in, so the Fmod was taking the wrong amount. Floor does not take two arguments. Okay, that's gonna be the same error. We've just resolved that one. And days and months not identified. That's fine. Just want to make sure that those are the days and month is the only error we're getting. I am a bit confused by why this was giving me an error. And it's not actually popping everything up. Let's take a look at what our error here is. Days and months is, okay. Well, then I guess that's just a random IntelliSense error we're getting here. Yeah, strange. Do I have all my brackets in? It looks like I do. Okay. Interesting. All right. So, yeah. I actually am going to just cut this out for 1 minute, and I want to make sure that this works. I will come back and put that back in. I just really want to check something here real quick. Okay, so it works. All right, let's put this back in. Sorry about taking it out for just a moment. Again, double checking is always fun on this sort of stuff. And Sorry if you hear me typing. I am just double checking what my setup for this is. Also, if you can hear the birds, I am so sorry about that. So let's hit our DateTime struct here. DateTime struct, dot operator, days and month. There we go. Pretty simple setup, right? Well, sorry, let me get the right window open. Me alt-tabbing into the wrong window and you guys not being able to see. So, this has set up everything, but we won't be able to see this until, well, we get to another video, which I'm not going to do today because this is already 2 hours and 30 minutes. Sorry, 1 hour and 30 minutes, where we have to set up the UI and stuff. So we're going to cheat a tiny bit. We're going to go to our debugger here. I'm going to pop this back open. In fact, I'm going to close it again and pop it back open. Oh, I have to do the default editor now. Or the full editor, not the default. We're going to change our game state to our primary game state RTS. Hey, I'm making the same error I made in the last one. Now, the big thing is, what I want to do is I want to make sure, I'm going to run it right now just to make sure there are no major errors. If there is a major error, we're going to crash. We didn't crash. Now, if you want to see if it's working, what we can do is we can actually debug this. We can go right here and put in a breakpoint. Now, it's just hit. Sorry, that's actually not going to work. We're going to make it work, but it's not working because we are not compiling this and running it. We're running it and compiling separately. I'll show you how to do that in a minute. What we're going to do for our test instead is we're going to go to our public, our settings, and we're going to create a blueprint class from this. We'll go to our debugging and test. This will be BP underscore primary game state RTS. There we go. All right. All we're going to do, and you can see we have our default values there, is we are going to print to the screen. So we're going to do print. We're going to pull off of here. We're going to do append. In fact, actually, I'm going to get our DateTime struct, which is DateTime struct. We want to get our DateTime struct. We want to break this. I want 2 of these, by the way. I'll show you why I want 2 in a moment. And we're going to do our hours, colon, our minutes. I also mentioned that when we get to the debugging part, I'll show you why, what the minimum number of arguments we need to pass in was. And I'll do that right now. You know what? I swear it used to say, but I'm gonna be 100% and say that I'm fairly certain that everything past hour is optional, or everything past day is optional. I can't remember. I'll actually look in the API in a minute. All right, then I'm gonna take this, right click, and I can't hide unconnected pins? Okay, whatever. Doesn't really matter too much. We're going to take that, and we're going to change these from colons into slashes. We're going to do year last, month in the middle, because that just makes more sense. Americans. And days first. So we go smallest, medium, largest. Unlike the weird American medium, small, large. And every tick we should see these update. We just plug that into there. Let's go back here for a second, change this over to the blueprint version, and hit play. Alright, so it's not updating. Interesting. We're going to add the call to the parent function first. Try it this way. And just make sure that it isn't for some reason. Alright, so yeah, we have an error, and we need to work out what that error is. The way we're going to work out that error is I'm going to show you how to debug in C++. We're going to close this out. We're going to save selected. We're going to put that back in there. We're going to compile from here. So this will take a moment, but it will relaunch the editor. Alright, as you see, it's relaunching the editor. We're going to ignore the error messages because, yeah, I'm not entirely sure what the heck is going on down there. Alright, don't restore. We are going to start with our primary game state. I just did the wrong thing. There we go. That's the one we want. We're going to hit play. We come into here. I just want to make sure we actually are coming into this stuff in a second. And we're going to step into. There we go. So we have the values down here. Our current game speed is 60, which is what we set it to up there. It's good to see. Our game time, we're not there yet. Our delta time, our tick is 0.0083. Our game time in is 13.50, which is what we expect, because remember, it's hour 13. 50 would be 30, because 50 is half of 100. If you think about it that way, 30 is 0.5 is equal to 0.5 of an hour is 30 minutes. So it makes sense. It's 5. And then 15 would be 25%. So 0.5, 54.1. Well, we've upped it from a tick, so God only knows if that's actually the right number, but whatever. We'll see if it's increasing like it should. All right, we step into again. Our day counter is 0, which is what we expect to see. Go forward. We then set our clock. Our seconds is 15. Our minutes is 30. It's minutes, sorry. If we go forward again, our hours is 13. That should still be... Day counter is still 0. It's 6, so we skip past that. I feel like I skipped a line somehow, but I will check that in a minute. We should skip past this. Let's just make sure we do. We do. We go down to the next if. Skip past that. And we set our structure. All right. We start back at the top here again. And we run into some error. Well, let's add a breakpoint back in. And step into. Alright, our seconds are now 44, so we have increased them. Our minute is now 35, so that's increased as well. Okay, so that should be working. Let's get rid of that breakpoint. So according to this, it is working. Let's just pause that for a second. Let's pop that open. I don't want that. Let's pop that open. Do want this. Interesting. Sorry, I'm just testing something real quick that caught my eye there. I might be nothing. I might just be seeing things. Okay, it might be something. Interesting. We know it's incrementing correctly on the class file. I'm not sure why it's not printing correctly. Interesting, it's resetting it. Okay. Give me a second to check my how I debugged this previously. Oh, son of a... I'm an idiot. Yeah, I just realized why this isn't working in Blueprint version. So, I called a parent. Plug that into there. Let's just toss our breakpoint back into here. And hit compile. That should actually work. Huh. Interesting. Well, that actually is working. Okay. Should print. And if it doesn't, I can show you the other way to make sure that the functions themselves are working. Okay, we'll do it the other way. Fortunately, this only needs to be done for the Blueprint version. When you're doing it in C++, in the final version, you won't have to do this. We're going to do our calculate time. There's our delta time, game time, and game speed. And you're not seeing these variables over here because they're coming from the C++ class, and I don't have it set up to show inherited variables. You're then going to set game time. Set day counter. So all we're doing is we're recreating everything we have in the class file real quick, just to make sure that the functions themselves individually are doing what we expect. Set calendar or clock calendar. Set date time. Just move this over here for a second, and I'm gonna copy all of that, and we're gonna pass in year, month, day. This actually might not work because, yeah. Plug that into there. Let's just test this real quick. All right. Well, we know it's actually working, which is a sad part. We know that it's running correctly when we look at the underlying code. I remember when I was working on the prep file for this, that this step actually seeing it in C++ and printing on screen was a nightmare then too. And I remember sitting there thinking my code wasn't working, redoing everything, and then finding out, oh no, it was right. It just doesn't work the way we expect it to. Give me one. Let me just try something real quick. This is just a random thing. Oops, that's the wrong day. This is one of the things about working with blueprints and C++ is some things will work in C++ really easily, but when you want to go test it in Blueprint, just to make sure it's actually working, it becomes a bit more confusing and hectic. All right. I'm testing is just seeing if, yeah, it's going through initially correctly. Okay, so that's wonderful. That's good to see. We can skip that, and then this should now actually display what we want it to display. Well, or not. Okay. Interesting. As I said, I remember the blueprint version of this always created some issues in testing. I'm not sure why that is, but we know from having run the C++ version, it's working. I don't like adding core minimal and printing that way from the C++ test. You can do that to check it, but I don't like doing that, and that's why I've done the debugging version of it. But clearly, as you can tell, there are some problems with that. But again, we know it works because if we add that breakpoint back in, and we follow it through, let's just switch this over to the C++ version of it. So if we follow that through, we come in here and we know it works. We'll hit continue, we'll hit continue, we'll hit continue, we'll hit continue. We're just going to do this for a couple of moments here. We're just going to keep hitting continue. All right, so remember, it should start at 13:30:15. If we step into our seconds is now 2, so it's the second. Our minute is now 36, so if you look at the bottom of the screen there. Sorry, I'm going to highlight what I'm reading, by the way, if you haven't seen what I'm reading. So we're at 2 seconds, 36 minutes, and hour 13 still. All right, I'm going to hit continue just a little bit longer. All right, now I'm going to step into we're at second 31, minute 41, and hour 30, or sorry, minute 46. So we're nearly at the next hour. In fact, we are about to change hours. All right. You know what? I think this will be our second or to second last one before we change hours. So we're going to pause on that one, step into it. We've changed hours already. We just changed it to oh wait, no we haven't. It is the second, 59 minutes, hour 13. So if we hit continue, we are now in hour 14. So 2 o'clock in the game. So if we step through, it is now, I went too far. You know what, we'll have to do this one more time. Sorry about that. I wasn't paying attention to where I was clicking. Seconds, minutes. So second 50, minute 0, hour 14. So we now have gone into 2 o'clock. So we know that the timer is actually working, which is good. Now, if you want to test this further, what you can do, we're just going to break that for a second, is we're going to set this to 23:59. The reason why we're doing 23:59, sorry for the squeaky chair, is we want to make sure it actually goes over into the next day. So we're going to rerun this, recompile it. Again, sorry that I couldn't show you this using print string like I wanted to, and I don't really feel like using the debugger, the console screen. It just annoys me using it for some reason. You know, I turned off Oculus support. I'm not sure why it's still popping up. Alright, so if we hit play, that's annoying. Give me a second. If we turn off the wrong thing and hit play, really? Right, did I delete the, I did. I deleted the breakpoint. Try that with the breakpoint actually active. And let me try opening the correct window. And we hit play. There we go. Alright, so remember we started at hour 23:59 on July the 25th of 2020. So if we step into we're 15 seconds past. So the 23rd hour, 59th minute, 15 seconds past. I'm just going to hit continue a few times. All right, we have now changed days. Actually, I should have not have done continue that many times. So Hopefully we will actually see what I want you guys to see. Yeah, I hit continue too many times, so let me just restart that test. Let me move the breakpoint so I can restart that test. Let's add the breakpoint back in. Let's hit play again. All right. All right, so I'm going to step through now. We have now 15 seconds passed, 59 minutes. Sorry, now 39 seconds passed, 59 minutes. Because our day counter hasn't gone up, we're still just walking past everything. So we hit continue again. Step into. We are at 39 seconds past. Sorry, 3 seconds past, which means we've gone past the hour. Give me a second, I need to sneeze. Sorry, I'm going to mute the microphone as I do that. Sorry about the sneezing fit there. I just blew my nose. Sorry. So we've gone past because we're at 3 seconds past. That's the new number. That's why it's in red. So we know this number is going to be 0 in a second. So we step into. Oh, let's see. We were checking our day counter. I guess it hasn't elapsed yet. How interesting. All right. Come back here. There we are. Our day counter out is 1. We have now changed days. All right. So our seconds. It's now 3. Our minutes are now 0. That's our total conversion's 27 right up there. I'll change in a minute. Our seconds are 27. Our minutes are 20. Our hour is 0. All right, so we are not greater than 7, so we go to the next one. We are now checking this value. We will not be greater than it. No, we will. No, we won't be greater. But what changes here? Notice that this is now 26. Days is 26. So this has incremented by that one value. So remember, we started at 25. We have upped the days. All right, so we know that's working. We can actually stop that there. What we can do now as another test, if you want to keep testing things, is we can go in and we can change this to... We can change the month to 12. We can change this to 31. All right, so we then hit local debugger again. Wait for it to compile. Wait for it to load the window up. Get really confused by the fact that, we've turned that off and yet it's still doing that thing. God only knows why. Alright. Actually, I'm going to close that out because it's still open. It's going to drive me crazy. Close that window. Exiting Steam VR. Alright, I didn't mean to minimize that window. For some reason, I'm just thinking I had to turn that thing back on. The breakpoint. However, what I do need to do, make sure it's on the right game state. There we go. Hit play. Really? Oh, yeah, I actually didn't put it back in. I was right. Okay. Hit play. Actually, no. No. Get rid of that. Hit continue. Hit pause. come back in here, hit stop. Continue. Add that back in now. Hit play now. There we go. Sorry about that. All right, so we step in. We haven't increased our day counter out, so we're not going to see anything weird in a minute. Our seconds are 15. This is our first tick, remember. So if we hit continue, excuse me, and we step forward again, we're still at 23 hours. So we haven't gone over. We're not going to have our day counter go up. We're at 39 seconds past, 59 minutes at 2300. Keep going. Our day counter hasn't gone up, so we haven't gone into the next day yet. We're just at... a little bit confused by that, but we'll work that out in a minute. Our day counter has gone up now. We are going into the next day. There we go. Our day counter has gone up by 1. We are 3 seconds past 0, 0, or 20 seconds past. That's why it's doing that. Okay. Sorry, I know why it gets a little bit weird. The seconds go over before the counter does. It takes 2 ticks for the day to roll over. All right. So we are going to increment this. Day of week is now 7. Because it's 7, it's not greater than that. We don't need to reset it to 1. We check. Is this greater than that? Well, hopefully this works. It might have already done it because I might have already seen the day counter. All right, it's already done it. It's now 2021. It's the day 1, 0 hours, 0 minutes. I want the month. So I want to see is months. Well, it's gone up to the next year. Now, I'm going to restart this for a second and show you something that I should have caught instead of hitting continue. So we at least know it's actually incrementing correctly, but I want to show you it actually incrementing. The way we're going to do that is we're going to stop that. We're actually going to put it right here. Oops, that was one too low. I'm on line 81. You know what? We'll just put it here. We'll put it on 79. We'll hit play. Here we go. We step through. We'll hit continue. We'll step into. We'll hit continue. We'll step into. There we go. It set days back to 1. It's incremented months. So if we look down here, it's going to increment months. It's 13 now. It's checking. Is 13 greater than 12? 13 is greater than 12, so it's going to set months back to 1. For some reason it hasn't. And it's set the year in the year 2020 to 2021. Our month is now 1. There we go. There's month 1. Our year is 2021, and our days are 1. So we know that our game time now works. So that actually covers everything we needed to do in this video. I realize that I spent a long time truly sort of tackling the what's it called? The not truly tackling, but trying to tackle the issue of trying to convert this to a blueprint. As I said, I know in my test file, I actually had to, let me just pull my test file over. So here's the test file version of it. I had to recreate everything to get it to work correctly. That's what you're looking at. You're looking at the recreation of the class file. And I didn't want to do that here. I wanted to just see if there's an easier way to test it. There really isn't. If you want to, what you can do is use the output log and have it print that information. I just think printing on a tick like that is painful to try to read through, even in this thing. And I don't like doing it. I don't like working with Core Minimal that way. I find it problematic and irksome. But hey, you know what we're going to do? We're going to create a UI. And our UI is going to be a custom UI. So we're going to create all our functions in C++. We will implement it in Blueprint, which means that we will have a little bit of Blueprint overlap with C++. So we will have to actually create our player controller class in Blueprint. We already have a player controller class. That's what we did in the last video. That's how I'm able to move the camera this way, do my edge scrolling, do my rotations, do my zooms, all that sort of stuff. But we're going to create a... Okay, let's reset. We are going to create a blueprint for the player controller that only spawns in the widget. Everything else will be handled by the C++ in its parent class. So we'll derive a class, so we'll create a child class in Blueprint that we'll use purely to spawn in the HUD, or the UI, using UMG widgets, and all the UMG will do, we'll reparent it to our C++ file for it, and we'll create the visuals in the UMG widget editor, so in the Blueprint, and we'll create all the functions that make it work in C++. So we'll have a little bit of overlap between Blueprint and C++. But that covers everything we needed to do in this video. That covers setting up our boundaries. That covers setting up our profile for our collisions. That covers setting up our custom game state, which is, if I can get my thing to pop open here. That's this file here. Again, sorry about the random fact that's saying this doesn't exist, even though we know it's working. It covers setting up our calculations for game time. It covers setting up our calendars. It covers passing that information through to a DateTime structure. And updating that DateTime structure. We'll do a lot more with our DateTime structure in the next set of videos. Again, sorry about how much I try to get the other version of this to work with, or to get the Blueprint child of this to work. But hopefully this gives you an idea of how you can set up a really simple to use calculation for game time. And again, you can change your game time to be anything you want it to be. You can change this value here to make game time faster or slower as you see fit. Just because we're nearing the end of this, before I get into the Q&A section, I just want to thank my Patreon sponsors, again, like Nemian Games and Tristan and Dave, for all their support in getting this series, this channel, and everything else off the ground. Again, it's wonderful to have that support. It's wonderful that you guys are here. If you have, if you want to help the channel out, all I ask is that you please hit that like button down below. YouTube algorithm really, really likes when people hit like, or, you know, comment on any of the videos. You know, it makes it seem like the videos, it just helps me out. And if you want to be here when we do the next live stream where we cover setting up that UMG so we can actually see our game time, so we can actually manipulate our game time too, because we'll be able to speed it up and slow it down as well. So that's one of the other things we'll be working on. Make sure to hit that subscribe and notify bell down below. And if you also want to help the channel out further, well, consider doing what Nemian, Tristan, and Dave have done and becoming Patreon supporters. I know I've been away for a bit. That's just been because things are hectic. But, you know, I'm back. I'm going to be more active. So if you want to help out that way, please do consider it. That said, I look forward to seeing you in the next tutorial, and I hope that you have a wonderful day. Now that I've done my usual outro, what I'm going to say is if you have any questions, I'll hang around for a bit to answer them. If not, well, if you're watching the VOD version of this, you can stop and go to the next video when it's out, or a different video on my channel. But if you are here and you do have a question, feel free to post it up in the chat, and if I'm able to give a coherent answer, I will do my best to give said coherent answer. Yeah. The fun part about when I do this is there's that long delay between when I say that and when you guys hear it, and then the fact that you have to type and all that stuff. Sorry, I'm just going to pop the other version of this back open. Not the other version, but just pop it open from the launcher. Interesting. There it is. Again, I swear I turned off all the VR stuff for this one. Oh yeah, also in the other video we'll cover interfaces. We have to do interfaces too, and interfaces in Unreal are a bit fun. Also, technically I should have that flushed the map. Whoops. Oh, good thing the collision sphere is fairly large. Alright. All of this said, I've not seen any questions. So instead of hanging around making this video longer, I'm just gonna probably call it here and say join us on the Discord if you have any questions. Thank you for joining us for the live stream portion of this tutorial series, and as always, as I said earlier, I hope that you have a wonderful day.